This is an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
As I've mentioned on this show several times, I'm an anal retentive pack rat. I have all of my previous work digitized and cataloged so that I can easily find it. And it was just last week when I remembered that I had a conversation with Gilbert Gottfried, but I couldn't easily find it. It wasn't properly cataloged. When I did find it, to air last week in honor of Gilbert's life and his passing, I also came across dozens of so-called lost interviews on cassette tapes, some of which I didn't even remember doing. So I thought I would occasionally share some of them with you. This first one is with Joe Rogan, long before he became the podcasting firebrand that he is today. Back then, he was a stand-up comic who had starred in the sitcom News Radio on NBC. It was also a year before he started hosting NBC's Fear Factor. This is just part of a conversation from 2000 when Joe was in Montreal as part of the Just for Laughs festival, which I also spent time with for about 20 years in one capacity or another.
A lot of people remember you from the television series News Radio. I want to find a little bit about the leap from doing stand-up to working in a television sitcom, and how that differs as far as your comedic skills are concerned.
Well, the leap for me was an accidental one. It first started out in 1994. I did this thing called the MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour, and after I did it, I just got offers to do sitcoms. It was literally nothing I'd ever even thought about doing. I just wanted to be a stand-up. And they gave me a development deal, and I flew out to California. I did a pilot for Disney, for Fox, called Hardball. It was a baseball show, and that got picked up. And then when that got canceled, I was like, well, so much for the acting. And then I got an offer to do news radio, like right afterwards. And so I went from there and went into news radio. But it was all, it was all pretty quick and easy. It was kind of weird, But it's much easier than stand-up. Somebody else is writing all the material, most of it at least for Hardball. For news radio, there was a lot of ad-libbing, like probably, especially after like the first season, a good like 50% of all the stuff that we did was ad-libbed while we rehearsed. But it's pretty easy,
It's a little unusual because a lot of times you talk to comics these days and they have a plan. They do the stand-up for a couple of years. They get an HBO special. They get a sitcom deal. But you, as you disclaimed, you wanted to do just stand-up. Was that always the goal, to do stand-up and not to progress beyond? Because some people look at that as not being an overachiever. Some people love doing stand-up, yet some people say, well, gee, you only want to do stand-up?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's really because there's so much money in sitcoms. That's the only reason to really do sitcoms. Because stand-up is a far better art form. It's far more fun. It's funnier. Good stand-up is funnier than anything. It really is. So it's more ambitious, I guess, monetarily to pursue a sitcom. But really, it's not as satisfying, I'm looking to do another one right now. I have a script that I'm pitching right now, but I'm in it for the cash, dude. It's like the sitcom world is like, it's all watered down. I mean, it's censored. There's always someone telling you you can't say more than one penis on the show, or you have to do this, or you can't mention product names, and because it's a very strange mix. To quote Phil Hartman. He always said that it's a very bizarre marriage between commerce and art, and that struck me as exactly the perfect definition of what sitcoms are.
You mentioned Phil Hartman, who of course unfortunately passed away while you guys were doing news radio. That I'm sure was very, very devastating to the show, but the show went on. Was that a difficult process to carry on after Phil passed away?
Oh yeah, it was real difficult, and maybe not even the best idea. I think we carried on because we kind of wanted to show that. That we were doing it for him, and we kind of wanted to show that she couldn't stop. I mean, she might have taken him away from us, but she's not going to take the show, and we're going to continue. And it was almost like a tribute sort of a thing. But in retrospect, it was a little weird. It was a very weird transition too, because we had a different executive producer the last season, and we basically just finished the last season and went into syndication, and that was the end of it. I was pretty sure at the end of the season, even though a lot of the NBC people were talking positively about news radio getting picked up again after, I was pretty sure it was going to be over, just because it was just weird, It was, he was the star of the show,
Coming from the world of stand-up and then working in something like a sitcom, especially with people who have been actors, have you done acting before you did sitcoms? And was that a daunting prospect, working with so-called trained actors and coming from the world of stand-up?
Acting is one of the most overrated and easiest things a human being can do, literally. Like, the way I describe it, I go, if you can lie, you can act, and if you can lie to crazy girlfriends, you can act under pressure, and the pressure of stand-up is 10 times the pressure of acting. Acting, you can, I guess live plays would be more difficult because you have to get it right, but you could always do retakes, and it's just really not that difficult. I mean, people make it out to be like this hard, but what's really difficult about it is not choking. That's what most people have a problem with. They have a problem with people paying attention to them, everyone, all eyes on them, action, go, and then they have a lump in their throat. That's the really difficult part for most people. Now, for stand-ups, that really doesn't happen because I'm used to performing live 4 or 5 nights a week, for the last 12 years, so it's really, working out and going on stage in front of people and, doing a set or doing a TV show, it really doesn't feel any different. It's all just what I do, And before that, I was a kickboxer, so I was used to fighting in front of thousands of people. So then from there, stand-up was easy because, well, what's the worst going to happen? I'm not going to get my ass kicked. I'm just going to, I'm not either going to be funny or not funny. And then from going to that to, somebody else writes the lines and all I have to do is say them and I do them with other actors, it's easy. It's really easy.
You also did Taekwondo, too. Weren't you a state champion in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I was Massachusetts state champion for 4 years, and I was the U.S. Open champion in 1987. And then I kickboxed for a while. And then when I started doing stand-up, though, I literally quit everything. I quit teaching. I used to teach at Boston University, and I used to have my own school. And that's what I basically did for a living. But once I did stand-up, I knew that, I was going to have to either focus on that or not. And so I just I quit everything and just started doing stand-up. I got a bunch of menial labor jobs and drove limos and all kinds of dumb things like that.
Now, was that a difficult leap going from the sporting world to the stand-up world? Because, a lot of times when people think of jocks, they don't think of people who are too bright. And let's face it, you are a cerebral kind of guy, and I'm sure people don't think of that when they first hear of Joe Rogan.
I don't know. I don't even know if people think about me. So I don't think they waste that much time going, is he cerebral, is he not? But, I don't know. Athletes, especially fighters, are very underestimated in their cerebral abilities or their abilities to look at things, because I think any good athlete or any good competitor, especially in a one-on-one thing, has to be very objective about his own abilities. And to be very objective about something, you have to be able to use your mind properly, and you have to be able to separate, yourself from your situation, and to look at your strengths and improve upon your weaknesses. And it takes a lot of it takes a lot of vision to be able to do that. It takes a lot of intelligence to be able to separate yourself from your emotions and your ego and grow. And I think any good comic has that ability, really. And as far as whether athletes are perceived as being intelligent, I think some are, but I think some of them, they're very intelligent, but they just might not be very educated. I mean, that's what a lot of it is.
The discipline that you had to do, had to use when you were in sports, does that discipline play forward too in doing stand-up?
Well, I've always had a lot of drive, and that really helped, especially in the beginning of my comedy career, because it was really hard. The beginning of a comedy career is a bloody, torturous process, because you just suck, and you so want to be funny, and you try to do it right, but it's really difficult. The early stages of comedy, you're always making mistakes. You always feel like you're never going to get anywhere. There's a lot of moments where we're really uncertain, where a lot of people suffer a lot of emotional damage, a lot of self-esteem damage, and that's when most of them quit. And for me, my training, my martial arts, all that stuff, that helped a lot because I was just very driven. I was determined to get through all that no matter what.
And you mentioned training. Comedy is one of the only things, unlike music, unlike sports, where you can't really practice. You've just got to go up on stage, right?
Yeah, you can't practice at all. I mean, there's guys that are really bad comics that try to practice jokes on you, but you know when it's happening. But then again, some of the funniest things that have ever happened to me, or that I've ever said on stage, are things that actually happened to me that I just retold on stage, in a constructed manner. I edited it and got it to a form where it's more amusing or entertaining or whatever, or, added things to it. But, yeah, you can't practice it in any other way. You have to just go on stage. I know people have asked me, hey, I practice in front of a microphone and I tape myself, or I get a video camera. It just doesn't work. Yeah, you have to get an audience. It's the only way to do it.
How much does the audience get to see of Joe Rogan? How much do you reveal of yourself in your stand-up routine, or is it basically a fabrication of your mind?
Well, some of it is fabrication, and some of it is entirely like honest thoughts. Most of it, I think, is entirely honest thoughts, but it's like extreme. Like you have to be in those situations to have those thoughts. And most of my comedy is from a point of view of, I'm taking it to whatever extreme, anger and emotion or sexual drive or whatever you might have at that moment. It has to be like really far out there for me to grasp. It's like I want to dig as deep into the well as I could possibly get till I hit the rock, And but I don't ever say anything I don't believe. Like I would never say, I hate Barbra Streisand unless I really did hate Barbra Streisand. I would never, like I used to do, I've done a bunch of bits that I had to actually stop doing because I didn't believe it anymore. Like I used to do a joke about Ricky Martin where I used to think it was really weak that guys would always like, yeah, Ricky Martin's gay, Ricky Martin's gay. I'm like, why don't you drop your girlfriend off at Ricky's place and find out how gay he really is, And then all these people were telling me that like knew that, he probably is gay. I'm like, oh. Well, then there was this doubt in my head. My friends were like, well, that's still a funny bit because it's like a long bit. It takes like a couple minutes. I'm like, I can't do it anymore. Because now in my head, I think, there's a possibility or whatever. It's not there anymore,
It's always been said that comedy is something that when people work on stage, they get into the mindset of the audience. They talk to the common man. Does it make it more difficult as a comedian the more success you have because you're no longer in the same realm, the same zone as the audience is? Is it harder to relate the more successful you become?
Well, I'm not successful enough to that becomes a problem. I think.
But I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah, I think that might be a problem when you get to be like a Jerry Seinfeld guy, where people know that you're really, really, really rich, and people get jealous and they judge their own life by your accomplishments, and they get, they resent you a little bit, but. My stand-up has always been, and I think the best stand-up has always been, here's the world through my eyes, which is why in my favorite comic of all time is probably Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor, it didn't matter how successful he got, he was always brilliant. And one of the reasons why is because he always was 100% honest in his expression. And when he was on stage, he would talk about his world through his eyes, and you would be inside his head. I think the best comedy is here's the world through my eyes. The best comedy is when you're inside the person's head and you forget you're even watching them. You're just experiencing what they're talking about. You're experiencing their emotions, their whatever, their anger, whatever it is at the moment, their confusion. You experience it because they're doing it with such mastery that you're inside their head at that moment. It's it's not faked. It's so unaffected. That's the word I'm looking for. It's it's really real. And if people know when you're faking the funk, if you go out there and you're trying to be this crazy guy, you get 2 cigarettes, one in each hand, and they're just not gonna go with you, But if you have a real feeling and a real thought, people can feel it. It's like a sixth sense or whatever it is. They lock in, and the best comics can lock an audience in. And I really don't think it matters what your economic state is or your state of fame. I think if you're being real, the people are going to feel it. As long as you're still in touch with who you are. I think a lot of things that happen to a lot of really famous comedians is they lose who they are. They become really famous and they become that guy. Another one of my favorite comics is Sam Kinison, and I really think that happened to him. Because Sam Kinison in the early days was this wild guy with this like really funny stuff. Like when he talked about like Ethiopia, like you people live in a desert, like all that stuff was really, really funny, like insightful things. And then later on in his career, it was like just horrible gay bashing, and it just wasn't funny. It was like he had kind of fallen into this trap of, of representing this group of monkeys that used to come see him, and he thought, he was that guy, this rock and roll comic. He had some gay bashing and stuff in his early CDs, and some of it was in poor taste or whatever. But it was his, whether it was an ignorant point of view or whatever, it was his genuine point of view, and some of it was really funny. But when he got to the later stages of his career, he just really wasn't funny. It was really bad, And part of it could have been because he was abusing drugs or whatever it was. But that's a really good example of a guy who became his persona and wasn't real anymore. I think he's probably the best example.
That was part of a conversation from 2000 with Joe Rogan. He has since become a somewhat polarizing figure with his multi-million-dollar podcasting deal on Spotify, But as you heard in this conversation, he was always opinionated and didn't shy away from sharing his point of view.
You've just heard an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File program with Peter Anthony Holder. To hear any or all of the full hour-long shows, visit thestufffile.com. Stuph is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's thestufffile.com. A presentation of Flying Fish Communications.